Welcome to the Faith is Not Blind podcast. I'm Eric Devonier, and I'm here today with Jason Rose. Welcome, Jason.
Hi.
Yeah, it's good to see you. We'd like to start off just with you introducing yourself a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what your background is, maybe a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So I grew up mostly in a little town in Idaho called Buell. It's not too far from Twin Falls, and but before that, my family bounced around quite a bit. So we were, when I was, from the time I was about 2.5 until I was 6, we lived in Los Angeles. And my mom worked as a nurse, and my dad was a truck broker. So, my parents were kind of growing apart a little bit, and my mom actually went to go see a divorce lawyer and said, wanted to get a divorce. And apparently the lawyer was a member of the church. He was actually a stake president. Of course, my mom didn't know that. And but as she was describing why she wanted to get a divorce, he said, "Well, I know these two young men that could come and visit your family and teach you, and I think it would really help." And so she agreed to have the missionaries come and teach my family. And the thing that I remember distinctly from that was just the feeling that I was so happy that the missionaries were there, and I enjoyed them coming and teaching lessons. I was excited, when they were.
And how old were you?
About 6 at this point.
So you're about 6, and then you're still in LA?
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
Right, and then they came over and taught your family the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I remember distinctly walking around the schoolyard and reflecting on how happy I was and how much my family had changed in that period of time with the missionaries there. Mm-hmm. So my mom had been looking for a religion to kind of raise us in, and we'd gone to other churches and tried other things, but this was different. I definitely felt the difference there, and I was excited about that. So I wasn't old enough to get baptized at that point, but my mom got baptized, and my older sister got baptized, and my dad was less active, and so he was reactivated. And so that a lot of unity came into our family, and I felt like we had a focus, and I really liked that. And it wasn't too long after that we moved to Buell and so that change from big city to rural Idaho was pretty hard, and it was particularly hard on my mom because she'd always worked as a nurse, but in small town Idaho, that was really an unusual thing for someone who was LDS to work outside the home. And so here was this person that was very competent and had a lot to contribute to the ward, but always, whenever she went to church, had to deal with that negative stereotype that surrounded women who worked outside the home at the time. And so that just gradually kind of drove her away from the church. And so I think that's maybe the first difficult experience in my life, was dealing with the fact that, well, not everybody in my family, is going to church, and kind of reconciling that.
So about how old were you when your mother started to not attend church anymore?
About 8. Yeah.
So just in a couple of years. So right around the time of your baptism, too.
Yeah.
And then how did that affect your testimony of the gospel and of the church?
I think it was more, what didn't affect my testimony, it was more like a problem that I felt I needed to kind of overcome. And because I don't know that my testimony kind of grew organically. So from that first experience with the missionaries to, and then, just notice as you read the scriptures or you learn things in school, and you're like, oh, that fits nicely with the gospel. And so those little things kind of accumulate. And so I felt like that's how my testimony grew. And I also had good friends. When I was in 4th grade, I met a friend that's still my friend today, and his parents were strong in the gospel, and kind of took me under their wing. And so I had that experience. They would read the scriptures, at night. So if I stayed over there, if I stayed for dinner, then after dinner we would read scriptures, or I'd be there for family home evening with them. And so I got to see that modeled. And the other thing was that they were very open about discussing, issues in the church, or things that it was okay to talk about. Well, this is not going well, but we could do this, or you know, it was more open in terms of the gospel dialogue they had because they were more mature in the church. So,
Yeah. And so that sort of helped you along. I mean, was it hard to see some of those things happening at a different house and then feel like, well, I wish this was happening at mine?
I think I just enjoyed it. I was glad to see, you know, and I could. That was nice just to have that that experience and kind of see, oh yeah, this is how this could work, and you know, that's not how my family is, and I wish it was, but you know, it made it okay for me.
Yeah, and then from there, so what about your sister? Was she still going to church with you?
Yeah,
or?
as she became a teenager, then she stopped coming, and then my dad, my parents separated, and so he stopped going to church, and yeah, so then for a while there, I was kind of the only one that was going to church, but all my you know, my best friend, and then other friends that I had were all going on missions, and so it still seemed natural to me. My parents were supportive of me going, and so it wasn't, it wasn't that I was ever faced, you know, real opposition at home. It's just things weren't, you know, textbook good, and so that wasn't a problem. But
so you went and served a mission in St. Louis,
and
how did that experience help to grow your testimony?
Yeah, so when I got there, I was really disappointed to get a call stateside, and the reason was because I felt like if I could speak a different language, I could be outside of myself, so that I could, you know, that I would it somehow would be a protection to me that I wouldn't have to be. I could have a division between, oh, this is me inside, and if people reject me, well, they're rejecting me in another language, and you know, maybe that would be okay. So I was really like, oh, that was not expected. All my other friends went to, you know, Costa Rica or Dominican Republic or somewhere, you know. My best friend, his dad had been the president of the Spanish branch, and so, you know, could speak Spanish. I thought, well, surely I'll do, you know, I'll go somewhere Spanish speaking like everybody else, and so that was a big surprise to go. And then then I felt a little more naked, like, oh, okay, yeah, these are people that I can communicate very well with, and you know, so there's no separation there. But in my mission, we had this program where you had to carry around a clipboard, and you had to pretend as though you were taking a survey. So we. It was very prescribed. So when you went to zone conference, the assistant to the president would say, well, you have to open the screen door and put your foot inside it, which, you know, that's a little bit forward, right?
Yeah,
especially if you're a shy person like me.
Sure.
And then you have to knock exactly 7 times, and then you have to say, hi, we're in the neighborhood taking a survey, and we wondered, you know, if you'd have a time to answer just a few questions for us. And so that pretense that you were taking a survey would kind of get people at least a little, you know, okay, this isn't a vacuum cleaner salesman, they're just taking a survey.
Right.
And then you would just sort of randomly, whatever, you know, if you saw bicycles in the yard, you'd ask about the importance of families, or you know, if it looked more like this is a bachelor pad, then what's the purpose of life, and that kind of thing. And then you try to get the conversation going from there and invite yourself in for a little message. But that pretense of doing a survey was very difficult for me because it felt dishonest, I thought, and that because it felt dishonest, I was like, wow, this is different. I didn't expect the church to support something that was dishonest like that. And so it kind of shook me a little bit.
Sure.
And instead of being shaken in an environment where I still had, you know, people around me who I could talk to or that would understand, now I was in this environment where, you know, the majority was, I don't know, where I grew up was not majority Mormon, but it was probably minority majority, like 25% Mormon or so. But so I always had a good core of people around me that I could ask, and then here this kind of shook me to have the
and some people that might not even, maybe some certainly other missioners maybe your age who might not recognize the question that you have, might not be able to see it, you know.
It was hard to,
they might see it as simply a yes or no type issue, right? Are you obedient or not? But you're talking about, for you, it became an issue of integrity, it sounds like. So how did you, you know, and then you've got support from home, like your family's really supportive, but maybe you don't feel like you can reach out to them in the way that you could with some of the other friends that you had. I mean, so how did you work through that?
Yeah, so I think the mistake I made was I could have just told my mission president that that's what I'm struggling with. But I was afraid because of all the training that we had around how this was inspired, and if you didn't follow this particular program, you wouldn't be successful, and obedience was the key, right? And so if you were obedient to this requirement to lie, then you'll be successful, and if not. And so that sort of answered the question for me, and I think if I would have told the mission president, I'm really struggling with this, and here's why, but I was not brave enough to do that, and instead I started to question my own testimony. And one thing that didn't help was the ban on books. So you weren't allowed to have any books in your mission other than there was like a mission library.
Mission library, right.
Yeah, so I started to look for ways to get reading material. I became a mail order book customer. I was ordering books and keeping them under my pillow, and then I could read when my companion was in the shower.
Yeah.
And so trying to, supplement my testimony, answer questions, and if we were near a library, we would stop in, and I would, see what things there were on topics of scriptures and Mormonism and things like that. And of course, you can get into things that are kind of, not very supportive. So I remember, pulling out the Encyclopedia Britannica and reading about Mormonism, and there was a complete description of the temple ceremony in there. And I thought, oh, wow, that's quite disrespectful. And it's since changed, I think. But and another time I picked up a book that was, quite critical of Joseph Smith, and pointed out some things that I hadn't known about in his history, and I remember just being really shaken to the core by that.
So how did you work through that? Because so you go to these books to sort of help with this issue, and for you, it's a question of integrity, and that's a really hard one, because you feel that to your core. I mean, it's just really internal, and so how did that reading help you, or how did it shape you?
Yeah, well, I think I discovered farms, and I started. This was the Foundation for Ancient Research and Mormon Studies, and I started. I started ordering books from them and reading them, and collecting Old Testament pseudepigraphers. So I walked around with quite a large library.
Yeah, I was going to say, your luggage
became
must have
comfortable
been
with it.
huge.
I just moved boxes and boxes of transfers. But what really made the difference for me was. I served in a ward, and it was there were a couple companionships of missionaries in this ward, and then there was an older couple, and so they just had an apartment, and got to interact with them. It was interesting what they did, because they lived in this ward, and they just found ways to lift and serve other people. So. And they're just gradually building on this ward, and they would go out tracting and things. And one time we were at their home, and found out that Elder Hanks had a love of Hugh Nibley books, which I also had been enjoying, and so we shared that thing. And I said, this tracting program, what do you do when you go out tracting? He's like, oh, you mean the survey? I don't do that. That's dishonest. And that was actually that just flipped a light for me, that you can have an opinion of your own. You can live with that dissonance between what your mission president is telling you to do, and I think that's only fair, really. I think another one of my mistakes was to imagine that my mission president was perfect, or that he couldn't make a mistake, or that this and probably was a very effective program, and maybe if I had asked, I would have gotten over this problem much sooner. But it just made it a ton easier to me. It was just that revelation of you can live with that,
Yeah, well, sometimes
it's not all black and white either. The church, either my mission president is perfect or he's not, and the church is perfect or it's not. And it seems like a silly revelation, but for me it was it was important. So
I think it's important to see that. It's one thing, I think, when you're a young person and you have a question like that. It's one thing to sort of search through and to look through books and other things to try to find that information, and I think that's good, and that's a part of the process. But in addition to that, I think it's a great thing to see a mentor, to see somebody who says something and you go, oh yeah, someone just spoke a thought I've had that I felt like I couldn't express.
Yeah.
And I think seeing that just alleviates some of it's just the anxiety of having that question and asking the question, why am I different? And then being able to see somebody, just oh, I wouldn't do that. That's dishonest.
Yeah. Oh, that was easily solved. Yeah, that's true. And and before that time, then I realized I was struggling with my testimony, and I because of that, right? Yeah. And when I talked to my mission president, I said, I'm really struggling with my testimony, and he was just like, well, lean on mine and fake it till you make it, Elder. And of course, that dishonesty there was really hard for me to deal with too. And I remember during P days, I'd try to sneak into the overflow away from the gym so I could kneel down and pray and try to have some meaningful, angel appearance or something that would switch this thing. And the realization that I came to was, you've known since you were 6 that this church was true. You've had that feeling in your heart, and it would kind of be disrespectful of that for Heavenly Father to send more witness than what you can already recall, it would kind of take away from that witness, and that witness has been very strong for me, ever since. Just when I reflect on that, and how did this begin? Yes, and then I can think about things that have strengthened me as I've gone along, and good friends, and things that have held on to me, they've helped me, and I've since learned to kind of live with that dissonance a little bit, because I see it. I studied physics and gradually sort of migrated to mathematics, but I heard a quote this week that was, the most important phrase in science isn't eureka, it's, oh, that's funny. When you see something that's not quite what you expected to see, that's actually going to lead to that, that's going to lead to a discovery of something new that you're like, oh, that didn't fit what my model was for the world. But seeing that gap, as Elder Hafen would describe it, that gap between reality and the ideal is actually where discoveries are made. And a good example might be relativity, right? So according to relativity, light would have to be moving through some medium, and since sometimes it would be going as the Earth moved around, sometimes it would be going with the current, and sometimes it would be going against the current, so it would be faster or slower, and you should be able to measure that. And so the experiment was designed to be able to measure the speed of light in different directions, and it turned out it was the same in all directions. So, oh, that's funny. That's not what we expected to see. That's not what's described by Newtonian mechanics. And that led to the discovery of special relativity. So, and that happens over and over in science. There's, we're so excited when data fits the model, but then you discover when you look closely, oh, it doesn't quite fit the model. There's a difference. I didn't expect that. And that's led to, refinement of models. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that just because you had a model that was working, and then you realized, oh wait, but it doesn't describe in this particular scenario, that doesn't mean the whole model goes away, right? I mean, we still teach Newtonian mechanics because it works in so many of our everyday situations. But when things start traveling really fast or are really massive, then it breaks down, and that's when we have to go to relativity to describe those things. So you have to have you get a more refined model, but the simpler model is always a special case of that more refined model. And I think if we think about our testimony, our vision of the gospel, we can start, we start with a pretty simple picture, and then we see, oh, there's a gap here. So that's just something else to learn about and fill in, and we can not have to have it be perfect or worry that the whole model will go away or now be useless just because you discovered one little, counterexample or one little gap that was missing.
Well, that's a lot like, we think about it in writing, right? That we talk about revision, right? The chance to be able to see something again, right? To revise means to see it again. And so with an essay, it oftentimes the students will want to throw something out entirely. And oftentimes in revision, what we're doing is you got to work with what's there. And so what it's suggesting is there are parts of the essay that need reworking. And it's not starting over again, but it's like you said, that we've realized that we've seen something that we didn't see before. I think you used the word model.
Yeah.
Right? We realized the model needs to be expanded. And
right.
you know, Ken Bain talks about that in pedagogy as well, the expectation failure, that's really where growth can occur, is when what we expect or what we predict to have happen doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But that could be a pretty scary process, though. I mean, as I think about what you're talking about with your experience on your mission, I mean, mail ordering books and you know, worrying about being inauthentic or being disobedient. I mean, it's a real challenge to have to do that.
Yeah.
So one of my questions is, and I love how you describe that using physics. I think it's a really great metaphor. But how do you pass that on to like your children or to students?
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed what Elder and Sister Hafen had to say. I think giving them that vision of there's stage 1 and there's stage 2 and there's stage 3. You're moving from being an optimist to being a pessimist to being an improver. And I think the most important thing is to be honest about, you know, where that is, and help people to find resources that will help them. I think what's weird about it is you can find answers for yourself, but you can't always share those with other people because they don't quite fit. People's gaps they don't see gaps in different places, right?
Right.
And so you can tell them how you fixed your gaps, but that may not actually help. There's this important part of them discovering for themselves how to answer those questions, how to keep moving, and well, that's tricky.
Yeah, it is. But those are the most valuable answers, though, right? The ones that we learn for
ourselves, right?
And even though you had a lot of mentors, it sounds like, you know, through your life with your friends and even the people at farms, you know, those
yeah,
books.
that's right.
but then you also have this older missionary couple. I mean, all of those elements sort of come together to sort of help you bridge your own gap, right? And then you can do that for others. That's really wonderful. Wow, thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.